All right, welcome. I'm here with my friends at the Daily Scrum. For those of you who are not aware, we have daily scrums where our project management personnel getting ready for the exam, they meet, they discuss, they find impediments, and after the general daily scrum, we resolve the impediments. So this is the after meeting where we talk about impediments. And one of the impediments is Agile. People asking, okay, what exactly is this Agile thing? There's so much to be spoken about. So I want to say at a very high level, you could say that Agile is a mindset first and foremost, but building on top of Agile being a mindset, I want to show you some coherent things that happen differently in the world of Agile. So in the world of Agile, it starts off like this. This is a data flow I put together to help people understand how things flow. So there's a product vision. The product vision is really the end goal, the end state of all this stuff that we're going to be working on in the different sprints. Then there's an Agile project charter that encapsulates the vision. It's not enough to say I've got a vision of what I want the future to be. The PMI is really big on you putting that into some sort of charter, like an Agile project charter. And then the other things that could happen, you could develop a product roadmap that shows the steps, big, broad brushstroke steps for you to get to finality. It shows the sequence of how things may work for the releases. It shows the sequences as far as when you may bring in marketing and other things to support the product. And then we have release planning, which is dialing down a level below the roadmap, going into the release plans themselves. And the release plans just show you the different iterations, the iterations that need to be in a release. So you know that a release consists of different iterations. The PMI make this clear in figure 6-20 in the PMBOK Guide 6. And then we have the team charter coming on the scene. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in this rigid order. All we're doing is ticking off the boxes to say this happens, this happens, this happens. But generally, now it's not a bad time to talk about the team charter, also known as the team agreement, team contract, social contract. This is a document that has ground rules, the definition of ready, the definition of done, and the cadence. You should also think about backlog preparation. So how do items get into the backlog? It's always been a question. Is it by aliens coming down in a spaceship and dropping them off? No, of course it's by stakeholders, people who are end users, and the product owner could work on this. And this is an ongoing thing. Backlog preparation is not a one-time thing. Before you start off in earnest with the first sprint, of course, there are going to be some items there, but this is going to evolve and grow. That takes us into sprint planning. Every sprint, you should decide, what are we going to do this sprint? What is our sprint goal? So the backlog, and I'm referring to it agnostically as a backlog, which really is the product backlog, we need to take a look at it as a team and say, what are we going to do in this sprint? That's sprint planning. Time you get to sprint planning, hopefully your stories or items in the backlog meet the definition of ready. In other words, you're ready to work on them. So they meet the INVEST acronym: independent, negotiable, valuable, estimable, small enough to fit within a sprint, and testable. And then we talk about the daily scrum. Some people will call this a daily stand-up. It doesn't have to be standing up. That's what people call it. Next one to think about is in the middle of the sprint, we have backlog refinement, refining the backlog, breaking down items in the backlog that may be big, and actually going through the estimating process. When we say estimating, we're talking about wideband Delphi, also known as planning poker. We're talking about affinity estimating and things like that. And then we get into the potentially shippable increment. We're now with an increment that should be meeting the definition of done, hopefully. But this is not just a one-time thing. This recurs. We're not just going to have one increment. On a lot of endeavors, we have multiple increments. So next thing that happens is we have a sprint review. The sprint review is where the customers take a look at what we have done and they see if it meets their requirements, if it meets what they were expecting. They give us feedback. We could identify some additional stories. It's a collaborative meeting, so we don't want to limit it to just a demo. Then we could have the retrospective. The retrospective is a regular staple in the world of Scrum. It's definitely talked about as the final thing that happens in Scrum, but more agnostically in Agile, just remember that a retrospective could happen at any point. It doesn't have to be at the end. It could happen when something significant has occurred. It could happen at any point when the team deems fit from a more agnostic perspective, as PMI document in the Agile Practice Guide. After the retrospective, the question could be, has all the value been delivered? If all the value has been delivered, then of course you don't need to go back to sprint planning. But if all value has not been delivered, then you would go back to sprint planning. You do this again. If all the value has been delivered, then you would have a final release. You'd have some sort of closeout. Remember, this is world of PMI, so it's agnostic. We're not looking specifically at Scrum, even though we're using some of the Scrum terminologies. The bottom line is that what happens in 7 to 12, we could look at that as happening within the sprint. So we have the 5 things that happen: the sprint planning, the daily Scrum, the sprint review, the retrospective, and the other things that happen, such as the backlog refinement, and of course, the PSI, the potentially shippable increment. There are other terminologies we could talk about here. We could talk about the minimum viable product and other things like that, but that will be for another day. So we're going to go ahead and close this out, but I'm going to ask my buddy Frank, who uses some of this stuff in the real world. Frank, what happens on your endeavors when you have achieved everything that the customer wanted? Are there any things uniquely to your organization that you guys do?
No, we don't really do any other thing, provided we have met the essence of the product being delivered or solution being delivered. And because mine is like the multinational organization, so our solutions and products are internally used. So we're not like the tech companies where you are producing for the general public. So,
Gotcha.
so because of the bank, the applications, everything we do internally is consumed internally. So your customer stakeholders are all internal, except perhaps when you have solutions or applications that the regulators will be interested in. In those instances, you have external stakeholders. In the same token, if you also have an application that public will use, like online banking, things like that, then you will have some select public members of the public to be part of the stakeholders, so that they can provide feedback too. And most of those stakeholders, public stakeholders, may have been identified through a survey that may have been done earlier before the commencement of the project.
Got it. Awesome, Frank. Thanks very much. And thanks very much to our friends who are here. Go ahead and take any questions.